Greetings and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And today I just want to say a word about automotive repair for the homeless. You know, for the 2 years that I lived in my car was in old but fine shape when I became homeless. It had gotten me to my corporate job just fine, and I was keeping it up and probably would have replaced it in a few years. As I began living in it and having to run the car almost 24 hours a day throughout the winter, which is about half to 75% of the year in Minnesota, the car functioned, how do we put it, poorly. It got worse and worse and worse. When I was in the shelter system, back around Christmas of this year, the end of 2016, the beginning of 2017, one of the things I asked for in terms of help the most, and the most frequently, was help with my car. Because the car was dying. It was dying. Now, if you saw a person dying, you would apply triage. You would help the person. Because you know that if you wait and you wait and you let it go and you let it go, it's going to get worse and worse. And there's going to, sorry, a lot of bugs out here. And you're going to get to a point where you've crossed the point of no return and your vehicle or your person's going to pass away. It's the same thing with a vehicle. And I asked for help. I asked for help sincerely from the churches, from the social service organizations, from the shelters. And they didn't help. Now, I did receive one bit of help, and it was a wonderful, I don't mean to use the word bit lightly either, this was significant. One of the families who attended one of the churches that ran the shelter, they bought me a car battery because my battery kept dying all the time, out in the sub-zero temperatures. And I cannot thank the Beach family enough for doing that. It was one of the very few substantial acts of kindness that I really received, something that made a noticeable difference in my situation. It made all the difference in the world in terms of making that car more reliable and not allowing me to get stranded where I needed to jump start the car just to get the heat. And I was inside there just 20 below zero. So by them doing that, by them spending $100 to get me a new car battery, they really changed my existence in a significant and a very positive way, and I'm so grateful to them. However, despite all that, as the engine problems and the exhaust problems and everything from the spark plugs, the internals of the engine, the intake, the battery, electrical system, almost everything in that car over 2 years of living in it fell apart. And now that I have a job, this job has the longest commute I've ever had anywhere, even when I lived in California, even when I went into work in Los Angeles. And Minnesota traffic control is, again, I'm not trying to be insulting, it just is what it is. For all the states I've lived in, it's the worst traffic control I've ever seen. And the roads are in terrible state of disrepair. So it has taken its toll on my car. One reason my car is so worn down is because all this time for 2 years where I was driving all the time and living in the car, in Minnesota there's a stoplight at almost every intersection, and they're always red. They're not timed so that if you go the speed limit you drive right through them. You just have to stop at every single one. And my car has a manual transmission, so driving through there, just every trip I took, had 10, 20, 30 stoplights. And it took its toll on that car over 2 years. Now, I told the shelters, I told the churches, I told the social services, and nobody would help fix the car except for the wonderful Beach family who bought me that battery. But as I said a moment ago with an individual who's injured, if you don't help them early on, it gets worse. They get an infection. Matters get worse, and eventually the person will die if you don't help them. But nobody helped me except for that battery. And my car has now reached a point where with this long commute, I don't know what to do with it anymore. So I'm going to play you some audio of what it's doing right now as I let this video play itself out. But I want to make the point that one of the things people can do to help the homeless who live in their cars is help them maintain their cars. That's their home for one thing. It has to be reliable. But once a problem starts, if you can't fix it at that time, it's going to snowball into something at some point that becomes catastrophic. And if it were not for this wonderful family who gave me a place to stay so I could get a job, I would have had to abandon the car. And that's how you end up living on a bridge, under a bridge. So if you wonder why these people are out there living in ditches and bridges and tent cities, that's part of it. Nobody helps them when they're living in a vehicle and they have a fair chance of recovering from homelessness, but nobody helps them repair their vehicles. And I know from speaking to mechanics out there, there's a lot of mechanics who would love to donate their time to help the homeless. They have these special skills. They've honed and perfected these skills over many years. They're very proud of that, and they would like to apply that to helping people who really need help. But again, going back to my video, the total failure of Minnesota leadership, there is no leadership. There's nobody coordinating and mobilizing all these people to bring them together and to schedule something so that there's a way to fund parts, and that you can schedule the different mechanics who would like to devote a couple hours a week to helping the homeless. If there was an organized effort to do that, then things like what happened to my car, where it just died because other than that battery, I had to do everything else, and I had no money, and frankly that's not my skill, fixing mechanical engines. So I just wanted to put this video out there to point out, and this is just one aspect and one example of how the homeless do not receive the assistance that they need, even though the resources are out there to provide that assistance. There's no leadership. Okay, none of these social services were ever going to even think about fixing my car or mobilizing or ask. They wouldn't even call around and ask mechanics if they would help. They left it for me to do that, which, you know, I did to the best of my ability, but I'm the one without a phone. I'm the one with a car that barely runs. I'm not in a good situation to go out and find mechanics until I can find someone who would help. If they had repaired my car when I first diagnosed the problems, which was about 1.5 years ago, if they had fixed the car then, the car would not now be dying, which puts my new job in peril, because again, this is the longest commute I've ever had in my life. And it's not just a long commute, but the road disrepair is unlike anything I've ever seen, and the traffic control is non-existent. It's just one stoplight after another. No matter what speed you go, it's just one red light after another. The wear and tear on these vehicles, the amount of gasoline they're burning. You know, it's interesting, Minnesota fancies itself to be this, you know, environmentally conscious, new age, left-wing kind of scene. You know, we care about this, we care about that, and yet they set up a traffic control system that mostly has cars just sitting still, burning gasoline all day long. But when it comes to the homeless specifically, in whatever community you're in, see what you can do. Find someone who's willing to organize those mechanics and part suppliers, people with skills. Mobilize. Get some leadership. Not Minnesota legislators, not people like that. I'm talking about leaders, people who know how to lead, people who know how to get things done, and they understand. You know, they're competent enough to understand that if a problem snowballs and it becomes exponentially difficult to fix it here, and then all of this isn't even a concern anymore. Now, doctors do that. If there's a car accident, people mobilize. The police come out, the ambulances come out, they know exactly what to do. The first responders, they do a magnificent job. They hone their skills over time, and they get the patient out safely to the hospital, where another triage team works on them, and it doesn't allow it to snowball into infections and other problems. But there's nobody doing that for the homeless. And this is kind of an example of the treatment of the homeless altogether, in terms of all their needs, in terms of their nutrition, in terms of the legal aspects, the fact that you have to have a legal address, a permanent resident address, to get a job, to file your taxes, to give plasma. You can't even go out and make money giving plasma legally if you're homeless, because you have to prove a resident address. Okay, so these legal things need to be changed. This is where leadership comes in. And I think this problem I'm having with my my car is a very good analogy for the overall issue we have with the homeless, how It's not being addressed properly. Just building buildings and creating social services and government agencies, and then having them have a liaison with a church, which is basically calling them up once in a while, maybe having them visit. That's not leadership, that's not organization, that's not mobilization. It's a waste of resources, and it accomplishes nothing perceptible. It certainly accomplished zero for me, nothing. So maybe I'll have more to say on this later. I didn't have much time to speak, but I wanted to make this point. This is something that any community in the United States can do. Mobilize and organize and lead all those people who have skills with vehicles, vehicle repair. Because a lot of the homeless start out living in their car until their car dies because nobody would help them. And then they live under a bridge, they live in a ditch, they live in a tent. Then they start getting arrested. Their life will never recover from that. But for the grace of God, with this family who helped me, that's the situation I would be in right now. My car would have been abandoned, and I wouldn't be able to survive. So I hope this video, I'm doing it off the cuff without notes. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope it makes sense to you. Before I play you out with the video and audio of what my car is doing right now, which I cannot afford to fix. I've been pumping almost all the money I've made so far into that car, but this is catastrophic. I just want to give you a few quotes that kind of helped me when I was living in the car, helped me to get along. They're both from Homer's Odyssey, and I think it's the D.B. Gain translation, I don't remember, but when Odysseus spent 10 years trying to get back home to Penelope, and he sorry, I can relate a lot to Odysseus's 10-year journey back home. Two of the things he said, one of them I would repeat to myself was, endure, heart, endure. Far worse hast thou endured. And then also at another time, for I have suffered many bitter and shattering experiences at war and on the stormy seas. So let this new disaster come. It only makes one more. Thank you for watching.